I let out from Reno. I was trailed by 20 hounds. I didn't get to sleep that night till the morning came around.
Three, two, one, zero.
You cannot subvert an enemy which doesn't want to be subverted. Subversion is the term, if you look in a dictionary or criminal code to that matter, usually is explained as a part of activity to destroy things like religion, government system, political, economical system of a country. Starting from Hollywood movie makers to professors of political science and quote-unquote experts on Soviet affairs, Kremlinologists as they call themselves. No James Bond nonsense. The rest, 85%, is always subversion, manipulation of terms. We think that subverter is a person who is going to blow up our beautiful bridges. But according to the law and law enforcement systems of the Western civilization, it's not a crime. Subversion can be only successful when the agent of subversion has a responsive target. Subverter is a student who comes for exchange, a diplomat, an actor, an artist, a journalist like myself. It's most of this activity is overt, legitimate, and easily observable if you give yourself time and trouble to observe it, which means always a destructive, aggressive activity aimed to destroy the country, nation, or geographical area of your enemy. It's a two-way traffic. United States is a receptive target of subversion.
From high atop the battlements of Castle Curmudgeon, where anal retentiveness isn't just a way of life, it's a job. Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. Merrick, and all ships at sea. Welcome to the Blast Radius. Here is your Decline of Western Civilization News Roundup for the second week of October in the year 2023 AD. Dateline, Sydney, Monday, 9 October. In a heartwarming testimony to the fact that mass migration brings nothing but cultural enrichment, and if you disagree, let me be the first to say, shut up, racist! Jewish residents of Sydney, Australia, I repeat, Sydney, Australia, were warned to stay home and avoid self-identifying as Jews this week, as supporters of the baby decapitating Palestinian terror group Hamas threw an impromptu street party outside the iconic Sydney Opera House, celebrating the wholesale slaughter of defenseless non-combatants as if they had just won a particularly important goat-fucking contest. Yes, I did just say that. I can say it again if anybody missed it. Reached for comment, Australian Prime Minister and noted woke leftist douchebag Anthony Albanese said, quote, "My Labour government is staunchly committed to ensuring the safety of each and every Jewish Australian. That's why I'm going to propose to Parliament this week that to aid law enforcement in keeping these very vulnerable residents safe from harm, that they should be required to wear some sort of little identifying mark on their clothing, just something so we can know who's a Jew and who isn't. Hey, and calm down now. I'm not talking about yellow stars of David or any crazy shit like that, but maybe, let's say, a pink smiley face or a nice green exclamation point. We're still kicking around ideas at the office. A lot of things we still got a focus group, but we'll keep you posted." End quote. Dateline, State College, Pennsylvania, Tuesday, 10 October. Former NCAA champion swimmer and noted advocate of nudes not playing women's sports, Riley Gaines, is accusing Penn State University of canceling an event that she had scheduled on campus called Real Women's Day. The event in question, which had been planned to include discussions of such bigoted and hate-filled questions as, how come we let big hulking dudes compete in ladies' swimming races, had caused much wailing and gnashing of teeth on the Penn State campus, with some students needing to avail themselves of the services of professional trauma counselors after being confronted with the potential hypothetical possibility of an event being held on campus where someone might ask, how come we let big hulking dudes compete in ladies' swimming races? Reached for comment, the Penn State Supreme Commissar for Truth and Mental Hygiene, Dr. LaQuisha Jefferson Jackson X, said, quote, "Not allowing this event, it was a very simple call for us. As much as we are very, very committed to fostering an environment of free expression for people of all backgrounds and viewpoints that we agree with, we just can't allow that kind of shocking hatred and vile, evil bigotry to find a platform here at Penn State." Now, I'd love to give you a much longer quote, but I am late for my speaking slot at the Free Palestine March, unquote. Dateline Chicago, Wednesday, 11 October. The Chicago chapter of Black Lives Matter found itself in hot water this week after it tweeted and then deleted a picture of a paraglider with a Palestinian flag and the caption, "I stand with Palestine." After many respondents quite reasonably asked why BLM Chicago would want to celebrate innocent concert goers being murdered in cold blood, BLM issued the following statement, quote, "Yesterday, we sent out messages that we aren't proud of. We stand with Palestine and the people who will do what they must to live free. Our hearts are with the grieving mothers, those rescuing babies from rubble who are in danger of being wiped out completely," end quote. But did they stop there? Did they leave well enough alone? Did they say, we probably shouldn't have done that in the first place, so let's just delete the damn thing, pretend it never happened, and wait for it to just blow over? Nope. Oh no, not our BLM Chicago, baby. Our BLM Chicago decided it would be a good time for a rant about Zionists. Quote, "Zionists, we know we hurt your feelings yesterday, and we do sincerely apologize. And y'all are going super low with really basic, boring, not clever racism, Zionism, and violence. And you are just organizing people for us. Are you missing the more you act up, the more followers we get?" End quote. So for those fans keeping score at home, BLM Chicago is on the record as saying the backlash toward their ill-advised celebration of Jewish people being slaughtered en masse is the result of a Jewish conspiracy. Dateline London, Thursday, 12 October. Woman-faced minstrel and noted destroyer of venerable American consumer brands, Dylan Mulvaney has been named Woman of the Year by something called Attitude Magazine, which apparently used to be a publication for gays and lesbians, but evidently has changed its mission statement sometime last year to say that they celebrate all expressions of queerness in the whole wide cornucopia of iterations and permutations that the rest of us never, ever, ever get tired of learning about. But here, let's get it straight from the woman-faced minstrel's mouth himself. Here's a quoted passage from the puff piece interview that accompanied this ridiculous horse shit. Quote, "Some people don't see me as a woman at all. No matter how hard I try or what I wear or what I say or what surgeries I get, I will never reach an acceptable version of womanhood by those hateful people's standards. But as long as I have the queer community that sees me for my truth, I'm going to be okay. And I think if we all just adopt a girl's girl mentality and we say goodbye to the critics, then we'll have a better chance of getting through this because they want us to be in competition with each other. They would love nothing more than to see the L's and the B's turn their backs on the T's. We're all in this together." End quote. Says the cisgender male who started cosplaying as a 12-year-old girl so that he could be internet famous. So stunning, so brave. Dateline Washington, Friday, 13 October. Wisconsin State Representative, complete idiot and Democrat, but I repeat myself, David Considine told his colleagues on the House floor this week that female athletes who are upset about losing to dudes need to stop all their crying and belly aching and just work harder, goddammit. But he's not just saying this for himself. He is just relaying something that he heard from his granddaughter, who I'm sure is totally real and totally said this thing that she is alleged to have said. But here's the quote, "And my granddaughter, who is playing college sports, I asked her about this when we had this 2 years ago, and she said, you know what? If a trans woman was competing against me in the sport, then that just means if that person is better than me, I need to work harder." End quote. You hear that, little girls of America? You didn't lose that swimming race to that big hulking dude because he's a big hulking dude. You didn't lose because he's a male swimmer and you're a female swimmer. You didn't lose because he has longer arms, longer legs, and more lung capacity. That's just about enough of those excuses out of you, Missy. We both know you lost to that big hulking dude because that big hulking dude just worked harder than you did. That's your Decline of Western Civilization News Roundup for today, Sunday, 15 October 2023. And now I kick it back to my lovely and distinguished co-host, America's favorite cryptid, your friend and mine, the one and only, Mr. Caucasian Sasquatch.
Tactical nuke incoming!
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Blast Radius, where this evening we will be discussing Unit 731 and the most heinous period of the forgotten parts of World War II. If you're not familiar with this information, it can get quite disturbing. How far have you delved into it?
Not as far as you. Let's just put it that
All
way.
right. So I came across the existence of Unit 731 when I was in high school, and I've mentioned my crazy science teacher previous who
we should note here at the outset before we get into the weeds that a lot of this stuff was never known until the 80s and the 90s, like very, very recently, as for World War II information.
Because it was declassified under time constraints, not declassified due to not being classified.
Right.
It was only declassified because they forgot to keep it classified. Basically.
Yep.
Most of the information derived about 731 is derived through records captured from the locations that were taken by Japan during the wars. And so it's not so much that Japan kept very good records as it is that Unit 731 kept very good records of their own doings, right? So it's kind of hard to explain how all of this ties together. But what it comes down to is, in the same vein that Hitler was doing his what did he call it? He referred to it as a genetic cleanliness campaign or something like that. Wasn't that what he called it? Anyway, they were doing their eugenics thing over there that's been just wholly condemned by all of Western civilization at this point. While that was happening, Unit 731 was essentially doing duplicate experiments, just like these not so nice people from the Second World War over here in Europe. They were doing exactly the same experiments, except in these cases where the Germans would utilize 50, 100, the Japanese would use 500, 1,000. Their sample sizes were much huger and across much wider graphs of the human population. And by that logic, it can be argued that their statistics and information was more valuable.
Yeah, and that's why the story of Unit 731 gives rise to one of the most difficult questions in all of medical ethics, and one which medical ethicists and the medical profession more broadly are still wrestling with today. And that is it ethically permissible to use data that was gathered with illegal, shocking, horrific war crime experimentation?
Through war crimes, yes.
Yep.
Well, the data's there. We can't unknow the data. That would be even more of a travesty. Those people would have died, suffered everything for absolutely nothing, not less than nothing, you know.
And as it happened in the event, the man who was the primary author and prime mover behind the Unit 731 wound up spending not one single day of the rest of his life in prison, and he probably has a personal body count that rivals anybody else in the war, because his data were perceived to be just that important.
in both theaters. Anyone else in the war?
Oh yeah. And I want to, when we get more into it, I want to get into a tote board ranking, if we can agree on a set of criteria.
Yeah, you want to do the high scores? Okay, we could do that. All right, I'm gonna roll this for
because I think it's actually a really fascinating question. You know, depending on what kind of parameters you put on it.
This is from Forgotten History, and they did a really good 10-minute video that kind of hits all the high points. So we'll be able to like break down sort of the time frame of things, and later we'll get into the nitty gritty one with the video that you brought. All right. This is from Forgotten History, by the way. I failed to mention it once or thrice.
World War II will always be remembered as a war against humanity. When people hear crimes against humanity, most people immediately think of Nazi Germany, the Nuremberg and Dachau trials, and the concentration and death camps. Many of those on trial were doctors who performed horrific experiments using eugenics, torture, vivisections without anesthesia, and experiments upon human beings that included high-altitude decompression, submersive hypothermia, infectious disease, and other experiments. But few people are aware of what the Japanese were also doing, and for a much longer period of time, and with an even larger human population to work on. What was Unit 731? What was their actual purpose? What did they do that was so horrific? Was anyone involved held accountable, as were the Germans? What do the Japanese of today think about these men? Hello, I'm Colin Heaton, a veteran of...
All right. So we have the records that bring a cohesive concept to the fact that they were doing these experiments. The records we don't have are the actual numbers that they got those experiments with. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I know what you're saying.
Whenever they invaded an area, after an area had been quelled, 731 would come in and come pick subjects that suited whatever particular experiment they had planned. If they wanted 31 to 41-year-old women who are pregnant, they just wandered through the freaking countryside and be like, that one. They all got loaded up on a truck, took the experiment yard.
Yeah, and they didn't just need experiment subjects; they also needed labor to run the installations. So right. Yeah, you had multiple different types of roundups going on
constantly, and it was from different aspects of not just 731, but the entire Japanese war machine was completely driven around human labor. And so the idea of one unit showing up and just demanding these people was completely ordinary. And you remember the conversation we had about the arguments between the Navy and the Army?
Mm-hmm.
Unit 731 had its own intel operation. It had its own interior government structure. It was its own little private Army division with its own private Navy division and its own private Politico division.
Yeah, and it operated directly on the authority of the emperor.
Exactly.
Which you can't say that about many other units.
Exactly. That's my point, is that it didn't have an answer structure that went back to the military high command, because its structure went straight to the emperor. The actual representative God on earth, so to speak.
Yep.
So too bad he wasn't infallible, huh?
The United States Army and Marine Corps, former history professor, book author, and welcome to this episode of Forgotten History. In 1931, Japan invaded Manchuria and for many years established a strong presence in northern China. Later, as they invaded China proper and then continued throughout Asia and the Pacific Islands, the brutality of the Japanese army became legendary. In 1937, Unit 731 was created as a medical engineering unit responsible for testing, producing.
When was the SS Was it the Waffen SS that handled all of the gathering in Europe?
Yeah, well, first it was the Einsatzgruppen in the first couple years of the war, and then as the Waffen SS got stood up and gained more operational capability, they started supplanting a lot of those same roles.
Right, right. And they were a lot younger and jacked up on a lot more stuff. They were like true propaganda machine.
Oh yeah, they had been just steeped in it since birth. For some of them, or since their earliest memories by that point. Because if you were,
So that was 39, 40 when they were established, and then 41 when it went from Eisengruppen to Waffen. 42.
So let's say you're kindergarten age when the Nazis take power in 33. So that your all of your memories are just Nazi stuff, and then you're reaching military age right in the thick of the war.
It explains them their Hitler Youth vote.
Yep.
But so 37, so 731 was established as its own independent military formed. So they basically came to the military and took everybody they wanted and left under direct order.
And that's what one of the interesting things about the organization is that the people who were its main architects, Ishii and the rest of them, they didn't. None of those guys viewed themselves as scientists first and military second. They viewed themselves as soldiers who just happened to be engaged in this bioweapon type soldierly pursuit, but they didn't. They viewed it as something that was completely involved with the war effort and nothing else.
But bioweapons is only one aspect of what 731 was doing. They were also looking into like multi-tier bioweapons, where we're talking about infesting an area with mosquitoes that would carry malaria, yellow fever, dengue fever, that type of stuff.
They had a plan for attacking San Diego, with anthrax.
Right. And it goes way deeper than all that. I mean, these were the real movers and shakers in the Japanese military. And it looks like the structure was set up specifically to prevent the general military and Navy from knowing who were actually pulling all the strings. Right.
Something I find amazing is that one of the main things we know about Ishii himself is that the dude was just in love with the whole idea of chemical and biological weapons. He thought they were the bee's knees. He thought they were the greatest things in the world. And he was a fervent Japanese nationalist and saw the best way of expressing that nationalism to just be and I'm going to try and keep my Tony Fauci jokes here to a minimum, but that just the best way I can serve my country in the coming war effort is to just make the most kick-ass bioweapons I can possibly make. And it's such a strange way of approaching one's life, and it
is. Well, I mean, I think he was more of an efficiency expert. He looked at the available weaponry at our disposal and then glanced over at Mother Nature and went, that's way better. Let's go do some of that instead. We don't even have to field units for that. I mean, give me that guy, that dude, one of those autoclaves, and I'm going to need one of them little bubbles with positive pressure feed. A couple of eggs.
And also, I think you have to. Another part of the equation is that because Japan isn't Europe, they didn't have any of the same revulsion toward chemical weapons that the Europeans had gained from their experience in the First World War, when everybody used all that shit, and the guys launching the weapons almost sometimes suffered worse than the guys who were supposed to be the targets of it. So I think that left a lot of people on the Japanese side with much more of an inclination to want to pursue that whole side of things, because they hadn't seen the underside. And there was also an element of the thinking of, well, these must be really awesome weapons if they banned them in Europe. So we should probably build some, guys.
The Geneva checklist.
Yeah, the Geneva checklist.
Isn't that how Canada views it?
Yep.
I mean, they'll genocide and say they're sorry about it the whole time.
The Geneva series of polite suggestions.
Yeah, right. Of mild opinions. No, I don't know, dude. But every one of these guys functioned from a militant perspective. They had been raised from pretty much from birth in this sort of borderline Shintoist mentality that was being stamped out all around. And so the concept of glorious leader wasn't far away from ancestor, you know.
Yeah, and they had a real effective sort of 50-50 version of Shintoism on the one side and militant ethno-nationalism on the other. And
right,
you get young men drunk enough on that stuff, you can make them commit any fucking kind of atrocity there is.
Exactly. And that's basically what occurred in the early years of the war. I mean, at the time, Japan was dealing with a glut of overpopulation, and they were wanting some way to alleviate that overpopulation. And of course, one of those ways is, you know, open freaking war. Either,
Yep.
and this it'll be alleviated one of two ways. You'll either take more ground and not have such a population pressure on your own people, or you'll kill off all them boys and you won't have that pressure there anymore.
Yep.
So,
either way, we win.
Yep. We got old Tojo right there, bro. And a lot of people don't understand the mechanism of the Japanese army was very different from the mechanisms of most other armies of the time period. They would take an area, and after the military had been subjugated, the leadership was subjugated, they would absorb that military unit by sprinkling it throughout their own military units, provided they all took an oath of fealty in the whole 9 yards. They had to do the whole thing. They had to like burn the Chinese flag, stomp on.
Oh yeah, yeah, and they always changed the names of the places they conquered, gave them new flags and iconography and all that stuff.
Right. And then they invited everybody's daddy to come in and have 3 meals and hot cots and trained to be a soldier, but not really, just right here. Could be a cop.
Yeah, like after they invaded Manchuria, the people who lived there, oh, you're not a Manchurian anymore. You live in Manchukuo now, and don't you forget it.
Yeah, and it holds fealty, dude. You just triggered my phone somehow.
Want me to do it again?
I don't. You just searched. What is that place you called it? That's crazy. I'm sorry.
I didn't even say, "Hey Siri."
Oh, don't, dude. Okay, you're good. Don't be like that, man.
Sorry, couldn't resist.
I don't blame you. So this continues on. I mean, these people, 731 specifically, would go through these conscript units of basically local police is what they became. They became local military police. They were lightly trained in using a baton. They were almost never armed unless they were full on inducted into the military, which almost never happened for locals.
Yeah. You just need a goon squad is all you need.
Right. And that's what these people became, were the local goon squad. But there was more to it than that. The propaganda levels that went on behind the scenes in these places were absolutely staggering, man. The Japanese came in with all new media, all new newspapers, all new. And then they came to the old newspapers that were there and were like, look, you never printed any of that stuff. You printed this stuff. And we give them past issues so that people coming to look for an old issue to try to find something would find an identical paper that is pro-Japanese the whole time.
Yeah, one thing the German and Japanese regimes had in common was they had a very detailed and thorough understanding of the importance of mass media, and it helped them.
Right. Oh wow. And some of them were quite skilled in the utilization of it, simply to shift public opinion in a very given specific area.
I know. Are you kidding me? The Nazis had a lot of fans in America. A lot of fans.
A lot of fans in America, and as depressing as that might sound, it was because of the power of the various speech writers, and the words that were said were powerful. It's nothing against people who heard that and was moved. You know, they didn't
Well,
know
yeah,
that.
and the visual imagery was so impressive, and
Yeah,
so unprecedented in terms of just the
right.
exploitation of the art of filmmaking.
I mean, there had never been a movie house to show a propaganda film in before, and suddenly they were reaching hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of people.
Yeah.
Rapidly snowballed. So, and I don't know, man. Like, I kind of find it hard to believe that anybody would stick around long enough for some of the experiments that took place to come to fruition, to develop the level of statistics that came out of this particular unit. You have a true immensity of data. Almost everything we have on dengue fever comes from Unit 731 records.
Yep.
Everything we have on yellow fever, same thing. Most of our malaria data and treatments came from tests and results from these units, and we have no idea how many subjects were involved in these tests. We only know the statistics of those tests, the results, as it were.
Yep. And Shiro Ishii, who he's got a convincing claim to the title of history's greatest war criminal. That guy, I mean, you have to give him credit for pulling it off, but he remained a free man and died in his old age just by trickling out that data little bit at a time. That data kept him safe from prosecution, and a lot of his colleagues found the end of a rope, but man, his ill-gotten data kept him alive and got him. He got to die an old man, asleep in his own bed. And what do you even say about that?
Can you imagine the raw atrocities that man has penned? Just through the approval of a given specific, particularly heartless scientist wanting, extant data, things that we can gather. We just got to get these people together and do it.
In terms of single person body counts in the Second World War, that dude has got to be top 5. I don't see any way how he couldn't be.
I mean, he's right up there with the angel of death himself. I mean, no doubt.
Yeah.
And I think you would probably have to look into, let's see, probably well into the second Stalin purge before you start reaching those numbers, anything like those numbers again, anywhere. And it's sad when it comes down to it. It's a really sad tale, because most of these people initially, they were just good soldiers. They were just following orders, and the orders got more and more and more and more, and that's how they filtered out the people who were suited versus people who weren't. And the people who had knowledge of 731 and weren't suited for it were stuck right on the nastiest of front lines they could find. Good luck, soldier.
Yeah, welcome to the shittiest front we can find to send you to. As a message to anybody else who's thinking about stating their opinion.
Sorry about that. I have dogs.
I do too, but she's not here.
Well, mine's about the size of a large moose. And when he decides to bark, there's not a whole lot I can do about it.
Well, I think a Sasquatch should have a moose-sized dog, frankly.
I want to try to get me a decal made of me riding him. I've been talking to a few people doing like these weird sticker things. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. Back on subject. I apologize. I was distracted for a moment. Go.
I forgot what we were in the middle of saying.
We were
But
talking about
right. Single person body count, and there obviously is a lot of fungibility as far as who you want to assign the body count to, because let's take Auschwitz for an example. I mean, do you hang the body count on the guy who invented Zyklon B, or the guy who invented the ventilation system?
I
Or
want to clear that up immediately. We hang the body count on the guy who wielded the pen.
Yeah, or is it the guy who flips the switch and starts the flow? And or is
dude.
Or is it the commandant of the camp who is the man responsible for making sure that everything runs efficiently enough that we have groups of people to liquidate as often as we need them?
Son, you're getting tetchy, aren't you? Listen, no, man, it comes down to where the ink, to who gave the actual order, because if it doesn't, all of warfare is a sham.
So it's Himmler at that point, right? Or is it Eichmann?
Eichmann, perhaps. Mangala. What?
Because Eichmann's whole defense at his trial in 1961 was that I was just a simple bureaucrat following orders. What else could I do? And
right.
but depending on how you view that claim and him generally, he's either very high up on the body count list or he's not on it at all. And those are questions that historians have wrestled with for 80 years now, and they'll continue wrestling with them for another 500 most likely.
Or does it come down to the camp designer himself? I mean, was he unaware of what he was designing?
Yeah.
All right, so this brings to mind a story. This is going to take a second, but bear with me. So there was a French immigrant who lived somewhere near Auschwitz in Germany, and he did not bake bread nor make bread. He delivered bread in his oven truck. He had his exhaust rigged up to enter into the cavity between the. Anyway, it kept the bread warm, but it didn't really gas the bread at all. So when the Nazis moved in and took over all the local economy, instead of doing anything to this man untowards, all they did was pay him more to haul something other than bread and to not ask questions.
Yep.
And this man worked for several years hauling cargo from a given location at the rail yard to a specific place on a hillside over here, and was basically paid not to investigate his truck. And one day he had an exhaust leak in the cab. When he investigated it, he found that a hole had been drilled through the inner wall of his oven truck into the exhaust pipe in several places, and one of them happened to pierce the cab as well. So he had a little jet of exhaust coming into the cab, whereas his cargo was bathed in it. But he never asked the question.
And there you get into the question of where are the limits of plausible deniability.
Right. Did this man honestly expect us to believe that he did not know what his cargo was?
Yeah.
I think he does.
You really had no idea the nature of the work in which you were engaged. I mean, really, dude.
But at the same time, this man had a wife, he had a family, and they were doing just fine in their German hacienda over there with their German housekeeper and their au pair. Everybody's a good and person.
And it's difficult to begrudge a person who just, I'm just going to keep my head down and do my work and try not to see anything and until the shit's all over. And, there were millions of people who tried to get by like that. Understandably.
So imagine that in a much more intensive regime. And while the occupied Austria, Germany, Hungary, Poland, all of these places occupied under the what was that called? The Atlantic Wall. All of these places behind the Atlantic Wall, they were very intensely regulated, very intensely propagandized, and very intensely moderated. When you go into like the Manchuria debacle over there with the Japanese army, dude, like I said, these people came in and burned the previous printers, set up new printers, and gave them old newspapers that they previously printed, but not. Right?
Yeah.
The level of propaganda, it was like it went from an almost non-existent thing in the countryside to every single village has a town square because we burned the previous village, built a new village, and it has a town square here, have a house.
And also, back to the example of the Waffen SS, there is an example where the Japanese ethno-nationalism is far more severe than the German brand of ethno-nationalism, because the Germans, when they conquered, your Hungary, Romania, your Czechs, and your Danes, and your Holland, and everybody, the Waffen SS went in there and started recruiting. Come fight on our side. The Japanese, they never, ever, ever would have even contemplated asking a Chinese or a Korean or a Filipino or any of their conquered peoples to participate in their war effort.
Now hold on, maybe a Korean, but that would only be if they were especially Shinto or especially conservative Japanese, because they have like some weird myths about where some of the greater ancestors came from Korea and that they're supposed to come back and stuff. But most people don't buy into that crap. And you're right. Most Koreans wouldn't make the cut. They would have to be an absolute badass.
Yeah. And as far as the Chinese went, I mean,
no,
we might keep a few of you for slave labor, but then the rest, we just need to liquidate you. It's just liquidation.
And that's really what 731 really came down to being about, was not so much how to fight a war with bioterror, but how to utilize it domestically in a manageable fashion. If it's as simple as giving everybody in Japan a vaccine and everybody's good, and we just release it onto the rest of the world, then I think they would have done it immediately.
Yeah, you raise a good point, because it wasn't something that was being done in order to improve the country's strategic position and likelihood of winning the war. This was stuff that was being done in places they had already conquered and subdued. So right. it was more a matter of depopulating and ethnically cleansing rather than actually winning a war.
Absolutely. The interest was not so much in any sort of battlefield victory as it was in the capability of dropping a given thing over here and not having to worry about it no more.
Yeah. What pathogen can we deploy that will empty out this patch of earth most quickly?
That we
can. A lot of it came down. Yeah.
That's really the issue. I read oh wow, this is delving deep into it. I used to do a whole lot of like database crawling for various research type stuff. I really liked statistics when I was growing up. It made my brain feel better, and I ended up looking into basic virology statistics on specifically white rats, lab rats that were designed to be non-resistant to a given strain. And then the way the population reacted to it, and how the first wave killed off a given percentage, the second wave killed off a given percentage, and then right between the first and second wave, there was a massive pregnancies and a massive infant death. There's this cycle that all of this follows.
Yeah.
These people were specifically looking at combining multiple pathogens together into like a absolute death mix. The idea being to drop this thing on a city over there and send in your vaccinated troops to occupy it.
It's what we call today gain of function research.
Exactly. But they went a step further with it, not just in trying to improve the germ itself, but even further into mixing it into a multiple punch sequence to be released. Some things are just waterborne, and they were doing parasitic research. They were doing all sorts of just
Yeah, they had a lot of brain power on this stuff. They had guys just whose job was just, dreaming up esoteric bio weapon deployment plans, just like crazy off the wall stuff, including the San Diego attack.
A little off base, but kind of in the same bailiwick. You remember the bat bombs?
Oh yeah.
That's one of the most inhumane incendiary devices ever devised by the thoughts of man. I firmly believe it.
And that was a fully fledged program too.
Right up there next to the pigeon guided bomb.
Yep.
Which is another one. We should do it. We should do something on those too.
Yeah, we sure are fortunate to have oceans on both sides, aren't we?
Yeah, I don't think that's an accident there, bro. Just a few blankets. It wasn't nothing much. Listen, so they learned their lessons from history and from the fact that every time there was any type of invasion in Japan, they would have a massive illness that would sweep the island because the island was so isolated and they were so anti anything or anyone for so long.
Yeah, for hundreds of years.
Feudalist period. We have no records of what the swine flu did in 1919 over there. We don't know because they didn't tell nobody. And this is the type of lessons that they were coming out of, whereas the European theater was coming out of the First World War and the gas attacks and the different types of things that would later be deemed war crimes and banned by the Geneva Convention, which almost included the shotgun, by the way.
Yeah, and the memory of the gas warfare in the First War was it left such an imprint on all sides that even though everybody still had all those weapons in the Second War, nobody ever used them.
Are we certain about that, though? There are reports, but none of them.
Yeah, there are reports. I'll give you that. But they weren't used on anything approaching the scale that they were in the First War.
Yeah, that's true. Mechanized man killing. It's pretty much what the First World War was.
Yeah, and the generals still wanted to fight a Napoleonic war.
Right, and they just threw men at dude, don't get me started. I understand being trained by a bunch of old fogies to fight a war that took place 50 years ago, right? Because that's the war they trained to fight. But when you see the reality of the Somme, when you see the bald-faced reality of like places like Remagen, where it's just not working. It doesn't work that way anymore.
Come on, men. Well, let's get over the top and a stiff upper lip, and let's go get that machine gun nest. Let's just be more British. We can do it.
Sure, just by sheer stiff upper lippedness, we're going to take this machine gun nest that is currently mowing down your men at prodigious rates. It just, I don't know. That whole concept always bothered me, that it took that long for them to adapt their tactics. But imagine if they hadn't. This is another one of those alternate future moments where, imagine, if you will, a situation where Austria wins the First World War, and it's the Austria-Hungarian Empire across Europe rather than the Third Reich that's doing it. Do we still have a Second World War, or Not.
Yeah, we do because all of the monarchies were probably going to be deposed. That probably became a foregone conclusion after the revolutions of 1848. I would say it
Okay.
just took a little bit more than half a century for it to happen, and the First War certainly hastened the process quite a bit. But I think it still happens either way.
The balkanization with a detour.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, pretty
All
much.
right. So let's take the Second World War with Japanese occupation being established permanently, right? All the way up to like Manchuria, all the way through the Indian subcontinent. Like they do it.
Philippines, yeah.
Yeah, the whole thing. They take everything but Hawaii and like South Bimini or some shit like that.
Which might have been the reality if Midway had gone slightly different.
Right? If they'd have splashed a couple more of our birds in that one, it would have it could have easily gone a totally different way.
Oh yeah, it was a closely run thing. That's for damn sure.
So Japanese takes most of the subcontinent and most of Southeast Asia, pretty much eliminating 85% say of Chinese holdings. Today is a very, very different day. Or does
And then at that point they have got sufficient natural resources at their disposal to have a decent chance of defending and garrisoning all these new imperial possessions they have gained.
right? That's like I said, that's a very different world. When it said made in Japan, that could be from anywhere at that point.
Oh yeah.
Also, there's no ingress by the U.S. to any of the Southeast Asian conflicts, or the whole Taiwanese question becomes a non sequitur.
I was just going to bring up the Taiwan question. You did it for me.
It's not even a thing. That's not a question anymore. That is also now a Japanese possession.
Yep.
How about Australia? Which way does that one go?
Australia is an interesting question because can you keep Australia supplied if Japan owns everything they owned, like let's say at the start of 1942? And I don't know if you can, because obviously the first thing you would want to try and do is interdict their supply lines with submarines, but you don't have a whole lot of very good submarine bases left if that's the extent of their conquest at that point.
Right. And which means we probably lose the Aleutians too.
Oh yeah. Yeah. That would be part and parcel of Midway going differently.
Exactly. There would have been more ships at that battle and less. It probably less command structure.
And then you've got a question of resource allocation at that point, because do we want to defend the supply lines into Australia, or do we want to defend Hawaii from a full scale invasion?
Well, are you talking about on our end?
Yeah,
be Hawaii. Fuck Australia.
Yeah.
That's not even really a consideration.
And so then consequently, then Australia might have to remain undefended, and it could fall too, or the northern half of it at any rate.
Right. And then you have to consider possessions along the west coast of South America could very easily fall next. I mean, we didn't have a whole lot to speak of over there, but neither did anyone else, and they could have.
And there are places in South America with Japanese communities in them. Peru most prominently.
Oh yeah,
has a lot of Japanese, and so yeah, you've got that cultural factor also that could aid you in that endeavor on some degree.
I don't even think it would be too terrible hard if you showed up with a functional economy that was actually working. I mean, this is kind
and also the prestige of being the conquerors of the entire Western and South Pacific.
Yeah, and it would be just the most natural thing in the world for because by then you would imagine that Japanese trade would have started reaching into the Ring of Fire, and how long is it after that? Because at that point, given the choice between funding and supplying Hawaii versus Australia, we're definitely going to fund and keep Hawaii if at all possible. I'm not sure it would be possible if we'd lost Midway.
Yeah, I'm with you. I agree.
I mean, at that point in time, we had already drained almost our entire military from Hawaii to field the fleet at Midway. So there was a huge occupation, but most of them were support forces and in training and final exams and shit like that. They weren't fighting people.
And you almost have to ask yourself the additional question: do we even try and hold Hawaii if this is going to be the status quo, or do we fall all the way back to San Diego and return to the status quo of mid 1940?
Yeah, that pretty much would leave freaking Alaska just right, because they don't have but two deep water ports over there anyway.
Yeah, not many.
That wouldn't even be hard to curtail. That would probably raise the ire of Russia, because then you're getting into things like the Kamchatka Peninsula and them. They're Stalinists. They don't take too kindly to you taking their stuff.
Yeah, they even detained the Doolittle Raiders that they got hold of for quite a while, actually.
There's your American spies, obviously. Well, yeah, just not against you.
Well, I mean, there's a reason why you guys were given explicit orders: do not, under any circumstances, land in Russia.
Exactly.
Just saying.
Right. We're gonna hop into the next bit about their more heinous types of experiments.
Okay.
Many people were intentionally infected with gangrene to test remedies, as the Japanese did not have penicillin. Many were sealed into bunkers as they were killed with a variety of poisonous gases to learn their effects. And there was the removal of various body parts and internal organs while some subjects were still alive. Intentional starvation, deliberate exposure to freezing temperatures to examine the effects of frostbite and hypothermia, and many were infected with yellow fever and malaria to examine the results and study the efficacies of alternative medications as opposed to using quinine. Not all of these experiments were isolated within the Unit 731 compound and facilities. It was decided that a larger pool of test subjects was needed, and the most dangerous forms of parasite-hosted diseases such as bubonic plague, anthrax, as well as other lethal pathogens, were dropped in canisters on the nearby towns of Changde and Ningbo to assess the results of biological warfare. The effects were horrific. Men, women, and even children were used as guinea pigs. These activities were
heinous. Those are too dangerous to do on the compound, so let's outsource that to Manchuria.
Let's drop these things just to see how many we kill. Record the data. Get back to me.
Right. Yeah.
I mean,
we need the exact percentages and time frames. We need numbers, and I want to know. I mean, some of the data is absolutely brutal. Yeah. No, Scotty, you get it. Absolutely brutal. It's just.
It is industrialized killing just for the sake of killing. It's not being done to achieve any tactical or strategic objective. It's like I said, it's depopulation, it's ethnic cleansing. It's what's the best thing we can build to wipe out this population?
Well, I mean, as an observation, even Auschwitz utilized the people there as slave labor as long as possible before they marched them through the gas chambers.
Right, and there's none of that here.
None of that. This was entirely wholesale testing populations against different bugs, viruses. They had a unit that was working with bed bugs, dude, trying to figure out how to get bed bugs to pass the plague.
Yeah. And why wouldn't you do that?
That is the definition of blue sky research, bud. We know fleas do it. We knew it then. So the idea of like, hey, let's get this unknown insect over here, this unknown arachnid critter to carry a thing that it's not known for carrying.
Yeah,
So
there are no more efficient spreaders of disease than your mosquito and your bed bug.
oh, and they spent vast amounts of money on mosquito experimentation.
Oh yeah.
That was one of their real big honey holes that they really wanted to have pay off, was the ability to cause mosquitoes to like carry yellow fever, was one of their big ones.
Oh, I know. You want to know how much of a body count the mosquito has? Jesus Christ.
Yeah, dude, they've got us licked by a long shot.
Oh
And
yeah.
pretty much every single other creature on Earth whooped, short of like another virus, like straight up smallpox or something.
Think about how many men were killed by mosquitoes in the act of building the Panama Canal.
I don't know though, dude. Fleas. That bubonic plague shit was serious.
Oh yeah.
Fleas
I forgot fleas. I should have said bed bugs, mosquitoes, and fleas.
Right. If we can get, if you could hypothetically get the mosquito to carry something like anthrax, you're talking about a world-ending situation.
Oh yeah. And if there's a way to win a war without firing a shot, that's it.
That'll do it, dude. Something along those lines. Anthrax is so terribly dangerous because there's really no way to design or build a defense against it. Once introduced in certain ways, like the pneumonic form of anthrax is extremely deadly. The bubonic form of anthrax can also be extremely deadly. The contact form of anthrax isn't too bad. You can treat it in a few weeks.
Yeah. But there's a good reason why anthrax has always been so popular among guys who seek to build awful bioweapons.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Isn't there an anthrax island off the coast of Ireland?
Seems like there is.
I'm pretty sure. We'll have to look into that later. We'll dig into anthrax. There's a whole bunch of awesome, horrible, terrible, horrible, awesome stories about anthrax.
And that's just the band.
Yeah, right. That's just the band. That has nothing to do with the actual disease. But
I saw those guys open. I saw those guys open for Iron Maiden one time.
Really? Wow. I missed the Iron Maiden concert. I think I was 15, and I had to funnel.
Megadeth was on that bill too. That was a pretty good 3 bill that night. Yeah, it was Megadeth, Iron Maiden, Anthrax.
Oh wow, that's a good one, dude.
Yep.
I don't even remember who was playing with them when they come through here, but I was supposed to be going. I had a ticket and everything. They left the ticket in my pocket when I passed out.
Oh
yeah, they drew a big old penis on my forehead. Went to the concert.
Well, of course they did.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I earned everything. That's what I get for being 15, thinking I could funnel a pipe.
Yeah, that's exactly how old I was for that show, I think.
Right. Yeah, no, that's funny. It's probably the same tour.
Yeah, it could have been.
I mean, when it comes down to it, it's very likely the same tour. All right, let's check out the next chapter. Okay.
1907, and the Geneva Protocol on the use of biological weapons in 1925, and later incorporated into the entire Geneva Convention of 1929 as a result of using various gases in World War I. Not just Chinese were victims. There were untold thousands of Koreans, even Russian civilians and prisoners of war, who were used as lab rats. American prisoners, mostly downed aircrew, were also victims. Using these biological weapons was not to be restricted to Asia. There was a plan to release canisters of fleas containing bubonic plague in San Diego, California, from submarines.
Absolutely right. Like, these people weren't joking around, folks. They were serious. They took the money from the War Department and they seem to have consumed approximately, what is it, like 1/3, 1/5 of the war budget?
Yeah, it was an unconscionable percentage.
By themselves. They had their own ships, their own submarines. They had their own personnel carriers, their own internal military and internal military police. a white coat doctor walking around with a 731 badge would outrank any particular general they would come across on the battlefield. And even if that general disagreed, the army itself would immediately back up the specific white coat.
Yeah.
It was a baffling structure.
Marine launched aircraft, but the war ended before that could be executed. The mission was codenamed Operation Cherry Blossoms at Night. After Japan surrendered, General Ishii ordered the destruction of Unit 731, which included more than 150 buildings, all the laboratories, and the 2 adjacent airports. As the Allied forces closed in, many hundreds of prisoners, as some believe as many as several thousand who had survived up to that time, were immediately killed. Ishii wanted no living witnesses. Japan never signed or ratified Geneva 1929, but that did not absolve them of their responsibility of adhering to the laws.
Well,
They thought it did.
Yeah, pretty much. That's another point, though, is where Germany was fighting a receding war. At this point in time, Japan is fighting an expanding war. They got bullets, right? When the Japanese failed, they fell suddenly. They fell from their leadership being taken, not because they failed on the battlefield.
And that was part of Ishii's whole impetus for wanting to pursue this stuff so doggedly. Was he says, well, if everybody else is not using this stuff voluntarily and we didn't sign the damn treaty, then we should be using the shit out of it. This stuff can win us the war if we're using it and nobody else is. It would be stupid not to do it.
This brings me to an Ender quote. It could win all future wars.
Yeah.
All of Africa.
Exactly.
Can you imagine taking Africa? This was in their sights. They, as soon as they wrapped up this whole Chinese issue and then cleared up the Russian issue, they were after Africa. That was another aspect, another page in their lexicon in the future. And that's why they were doing the multiple mosquito malaria experiments. Was the idea was to drop a malaria that no one had any resistance to in Africa and South Africa and all of the deep water ports on the Horn, you know.
Yeah, and his thinking wasn't necessarily incorrect, because if you get one country, even one little tiny country with not many natural resources, but you make it the world hegemon of bioweapon warfare, and nobody else can match them, then that country is going to rule the damn world. If they're willing to use that weapon that nobody else has. Are you kidding me?
And the best possible outcome. Okay, so I saw a bio attack chart from 2 perspectives. One chart showed it from a perspective of there being useful treatments that the perpetrating country has that they withhold, right? And the other curve has to do with there being no useful treatments whatsoever, right? That the curve of the disease is just the curve of the disease and nothing changes it.
Right.
In the first cycle, depending on how good the spy networks of other countries were, determined how well they responded to this particular bug, because they were capable of stealing the vaccines or whatever that were necessary for the treatments. On the other one, the curve remains the same regardless, but the difference comes about where the germ is released initially. The chart that I was looking at suggested, at least in the broad data strokes of the statistics in it, suggested that it would be, and this sounds nuts, but statistically is accurate, best to set the population under yourself off first, so that you have the most experience dealing with it before the rest of the world becomes aware of it. And that way, your population develops all of the necessary skills and cleansing protocols and everything you have to do before the rest of the world does. And you're the one sharing through the beneficence of your technology, right? Which comes from hard-won experience.
Yep. We saw a lot of that a few years ago with some unnamed country and some unnamed virus.
I have no idea what you're talking about, but moving on.
I'm just talking nonsense.
Japan violated every provision of the laws of warfare until they were finally defeated in 1945, but few people were ever held accountable, and no one from Unit 731 ever stood trial. Much like
No one.
Top Nazi doctors and scientists.
Not a soul.
Not a single soul stood trial.
This is largely a byproduct of the fact that when Tojo, I think that's right. When he signed the armistice, when he surrendered, unconditional surrender, 731 immediately nuked, like burned, acid washed everything they owned. Everything they had ever touched immediately got liquidated. And this is a military that is not currently in retreat in this area. Unlimited manpower, unlimited bullets, unlimited material, and absolute command. Vicious.
Scientists. The men of Unit 731 and their senior officers and scientists were protected. The researchers at Unit 731 had maintained very detailed records of their experiments and used them as bargaining chips, just like many Germans did. Ironically, General Ishii kept a detailed diary during his entire military service to include his work in China, but there is no reference to any of his time commanding Unit 731 or its activities. That alone illustrates that he knew what he was doing was illegal and a violation of his oath as a physician. Ishii and his men in U.S. custody managed to avoid being charged with crimes against humanity and placed on trial, unlike their brethren who had murdered Allied POWs in the occupied regions under Japanese influence. This was
So, as I understand it, most of the reason that 731 wasn't pursued was there were two schools of thought in the government at that point in time. One, get all the data and scientists we can get, to hell with the price. Two, we want the data, but the people themselves shouldn't be brought in, right?
Yeah.
The only data available were held by the holdouts of 731 that could only be charged if they admitted to being part of 731, but could only get their data out if they did.
Correct.
So they immediately get a presidential pardon with no consideration of what their crimes may have actually been, just to acquire the data that was available and possibly slip them in through an Operation Paperclip type thing.
Yep, because we were that terrified of the data being destroyed.
Or simply being acquired by the Russians, because almost
or being acquired by the Russians. But that became the be all end all of the whole thing that trumped all other considerations.
Yeah, Lord, it got to beat that competition.
Yep.
was due to the fact that Ishii and his associates received immunity from prosecution for war crimes because the U.S. wanted their research for its own use in its U.S. biological warfare program and keep many of the documents and the years of incredible data out of the hands of the Russians. This was sanctioned all the way up the American chain of command, from the general staff all the way up. The primary catalyst for this was Edwin Hill, the chief of the Biological Warfare Laboratory at Fort Detrick, Maryland, who, after reviewing the thousands of pages from Unit 731's files, stated in his secret report from 1946 that the information was absolutely invaluable. It could have never been obtained in the United States because of scruples attached to experiments on humans, and the information was obtained fairly cheaply.
Scruples.
On May 6, 1946.
Cheaply.
Yeah. A fun couple of words.
Yeah, especially where they're tucked away in that particular sentence, because we're talking about the scruples of a nation and the cost in human lives.
Yeah, you know, and that's one case where I probably would want to err on the side of scrupulous.
But I bring it back to you again. The data exists. We didn't acquire it. We just have access to it. Is it evil to access that data that exists and could revolutionize medicine in 1,000 countries?
It is one of the world conundrums in each side of it has an compelling answer with the first part.
All right.
7, General Douglas MacArthur wrote to President Harry S. Truman and the Judge Advocate General's office that additional data, possibly some statements from Ishii, probably can be obtained by informing Japanese involved, that information will be retained in intelligence channels and will not be employed as war crimes evidence. Basically, it was a get-out-of-jail-free card.
Yep.
As a result, the horrors perpetrated by Unit 731 never became public knowledge in the West until recently, although some information was gathered by the Soviets, who placed several of Unit 731 personnel in the docks at the Khabarovsk war crimes trials. The Japanese themselves knew nothing about this unit and its activities for decades. In fact, its existence was even denied, and it is not taught in schools, nor are any other Japanese war crimes. This was only possible due to the protection the United States government gave to Ishii and his men, keeping the story secret as a reward for gathering all their medical research. Their primary Japanese war criminals, such as Hideki Tojo, were put on trial at the International Military Tribunal for the Far East, which was better known as the Tokyo War Crimes Trials. Testimony from General Ishii, which was taken from his post-war interrogation in Maryland, was submitted as evidence. Ishii and his officers, doctors, and scientists were never charged with war crimes. In another incredible sense of irony, the surviving members of Unit 731.
Look at that.
Reunions.
Right. I mean, you're looking at a force that would metastasize across all of China. Wow.
I mean, is there a unit in the entire war with a higher body count than that unit? And they're having reunions and nobody is in jail.
Yeah. And none of these people faced criminal charges that weren't caught in the country of their crimes.
Yeah, it's
because I'm sure there were a handful that got strung up local, like, you know.
I mean, I know the data are important and invaluable and all that, but it's just a very, very difficult thing to stomach.
Well, the part that's difficult for me to stomach. Okay, so we got the data and everything from Operation Paperclip. We got all the rocket scientists and all of those people, and we got the bomb and all that stuff, right? And that a lot of those people probably should have been tried. But this is different. Not a soul, not one individual from this whole unit and their subsidiaries and all of their corrupt dealings behind the scenes and whatnot, which by their school of thought was not corrupt because it was ordered directly by the emperor. So,
yep.
I mean, if you're going to receive an order, that's a pretty good source. If you got an emperor around you.
Yeah, it is. You know, there's nobody else's head to go over after that.
Right. You can pray to God because your ass belong to him.
Yep.
One held annual reunions to where they gathered in mutually respected comradeship. General Dr. Shiro Ishii retired rather comfortably, and he died in Tokyo on October 9, 1959, from laryngeal cancer at the age of 67. Prior to his death, he was baptized into the Catholic faith by Dr. Hermann Heufers, the former president of Sophia University in Tokyo, whom Ishii had known before the war. His funeral was chaired by Lieutenant General Dr. Masaji Kitano, his second in command at Unit 731. And the irony continues. Kitano was one of the founders of the Japanese pharmaceutical company and first commercial blood bank, the Green Cross, which was renamed Welfide in 1998 and which became part of Mitsubishi Pharma in 2001.
I wonder where they are today.
Me too.
Kitano died on May 19, 1986. He was never charged with a crime either. But in 2018, things began to change, and the Japanese government seemed to be acknowledging part of its violent past. As it happens, people talk. And as the men involved with Unit 731 grew older, a few probably decided that they could live no longer with their conscience. The government provided a list of names of more than 3,600 members of Unit 731 to a Japanese scholar for his research. Much of this forthrightness was due to intense pressure from China and South Korea, both nations with its own database on Unit 731.
Yeah, no, South Korea has a really, really big chip on its shoulder about this whole thing.
Oh, yeah, understandably.
Yeah, because they were heavily impacted. Like Seoul, dude, the occupation of Seoul, it could occupy its own war crime system. Unreal.
Oh yeah, and then the racism that
Yeah,
by Japanese people toward Korean people in particular is just as shocking and just as virulent as anything that existed on the European continent, and it resulted in atrocities that were just as terrible.
Or in the Deep South. I mean, and
yeah, exactly.
Or in South African apartheid. It is exactly the same flavor of horrible.
Yep.
And its activities. Over the years, as more information emerged, it became harder for Japan to ignore its past and hide the truth. For example, in 1995, an article in the New York Times published the comments from a medical assistant assigned to Unit 731 under Ishii. To quote the article, the Chinese prisoner had been deliberately infected with the plague as part of a research project, the full horror of which is only now emerging, to develop plague bombs for use in World War II. After infecting him, the researchers decided to cut him open to see what the disease does to a man's inside. No anesthetic was used. The former medical assistant said, out of concern, that it might have an effect on the results. So remember that at least the Germans apologized for what their previous government did to the peoples of Europe. Japan has never made such an overture.
And that's a perfectly fair point to bring up.
Absolutely. Because, and as they said, they don't teach these facts in their school system. This never happened.
Yeah, and which is really a shocking departure from the way the Germans have handled it, which is they've kind of completely overcorrected in the other direction, where their entire culture is about war guilt.
Yeah, it's a little disturbing. I find
it is really quite a bit disturbing.
And
but there has to be a middle ground somewhere, right? You don't have to do all.
I'm not sure, bro. I think the pendulum swings. I think we can't help but have the pendulum swing, and that the intention of the pendulum is to balance these effects, but the intention of the machine is to control the pendulum.
Right.
I mean, look at it this way. The only thing bureaucracies actually succeed at is the duplication and multiplication of work.
You got that right.
That's their defined only true purpose is to get more funding next year.
Well, yeah, and you wind up with the mother of all feedback loops, because each time you expand the bureaucracy, it makes it all the more impossible to get rid of it, because each time you grow that tentacle monster, then you're populating it with more people who, well, I don't want you to get rid of my department, I'll lose my job. And so that's, another little subset of the population enters that world and winds up, with a vested interest in it and wants to keep it that way or grow it even more. And it makes everything all the more difficult.
Absolutely. Another aspect to this Japanese invasion into Southeast Asia, they set up schools. There'd never been a school in the village before, and they would come in and build a shack to house kids to teach them how to read so that they could be properly propagandized.
Yeah, so they could learn to appreciate their new identity as a Japanese servant class.
Right. If you're not Japanese, you're not human, so you might as well get used to it, basically was the philosophy.
Yeah, we'll let you live if you serve us well.
I was gonna call my my Xterra the Yellow Peril. and when I started suggesting it, around, like I named it Stumblebee, but when I suggested the Yellow Peril, everybody was like, "Oh no, no, no!" I'm like, "Come on, man."
Stumblebee's pretty good though. I do like that.
I can't remember who it was that suggested it, but it's a really good one. I liked it a lot. I'm gonna take off the Nissan emblem and put me a Autobots emblem on it.
There you go.
Yeah, just go ahead and pretend. Why not? I'm bored anyway. I'm sorry. Did that not mute? I was supposed to mute. We got about 2-3 minutes left of this, and I'm gonna let him do his little spiel at the end of the video too.
Thank you for watching Forgotten History. Please click
That's
like,
what's left.
subscribe, and share. Send us comments and show ideas, and we will get back to you as soon as possible. Until next time.
Absolutely, bud. He's his channel, that channel is absolutely awesome. But you know what we have now, folks, for our whole palate cleanser for the last quarter?
Yep. Let's cleanse the palate.
Yeah, this is totally going to get all those brain worms just kind of
war crimes straight into TikTok.
Exactly. I mean, I see no difference. There's no change in content here. It's just whether it's current or historical.
Correct.
Cool. Oh, sorry, you got almond milk, right? Yep. Okay, so it's actually $6.50. Okay. Oh, sorry. Did you want that heated up? I ordered it hot. Okay, so yes, that's $8 for heating up. Okay. Oh, sorry, $9.50. Sorry. So if you're a little bit ugly, there's just a fee.
Women are not aroused by dad bods.
No, because women are only aroused by this.
Oh man.
All right, so I have to absolutely approve of that, man. I know what you're thinking, that that you shouldn't approve of such things, but my man is I guarantee you, whatever channel he's operating out there, he is making money on it.
Yeah, I think I approve too. I think I'm with you.
Like I said, I don't care if you dress as a monkey with symbols riding a bicycle. If that's what gets you the views and paid off, I support it. Oh my God.
And this has to be probably like my favorite part of the day. Get some Netflix going. Just relax.
I've been meaning to ask you, what's with that pocket on your shirt?
Oh, Jake's in here. Sup, Jake?
There's something wrong with absolutely everyone, isn't there?
There is. Very much so.
Oh.
You ever had one of those moments? You walk in and see one of your old fogies laying around and they're not moving enough to suit you. And it's like you break out the pocket mirror and check. Man, that is not an issue I have with my pops. My mom's is a problem. But my pops, head man, snores. Swears he don't. He's one of those guys. It's like, I don't snore. I don't know what you're talking about.
Oh, they all say they don't snore.
Good Lord.
Oh my God.
I'm old.
Heart's been broke too many times. I don't know what to believe.
When I was in Kentucky, I caught a baby Sasquatch.
Wasn't me. Might have been my kid. I got a few of those running around somewhere. All right, so this kid has distinct motor coordination issues, and it's hilarious.
Hey, what happened to two hands? No, oh, 2 hands. No, don't give up. 2 hands. 2 hands. Read. Raise your other hand.
Come on, kid, you got this.
I got faith in you, bro. You can do it.
His bowl is over here.
Look at him. He's got it. He's doing it.
That's okay. Don't worry about those. You got it.
Yeah, dog will get those.
So close.
Am I supposed to? Okay.
The way women just move through the world with complete faith in the claw.
See, I don't even think that's enough. I think I need to. Oh, my shoulders.
You ever had that feeling?
Once or twice.
Look at the blueprints, and you look at the ground, and you look at the blueprints. It's like, I shouldn't be in construction. I should get an office job, sit in a cubicle. That'd be better. But then later, you see this, and it's ruined.
Stanley Cup dupe. Ugg boot dupe. Tempur-Pedic pillow dupe. Rolex dupe. Roku dupe. Stroganoff dupe.
I'm just going to go ahead and tell you that is a chick who has become quite a bit more than high on her drugs from her broken leg.
Yeah, I'm thinking the same.
Yes, we are so lucky. But you know, I don't see myself like that.
Side eye. Side eye.
Oh, way, bro.
You go to school with anybody that had a crooked eye?
Oh, yeah.
I went to school with this one chick who it only really happened when she wasn't paying attention to something. Like if her attention wandered while you're talking to her, her left eye would just go check it out across the country by itself. I think it was looking for an idea. That's what I always said.
I knew a couple girls and a guy in my high school class. A lot of
Were they
lazy-eyed people,
related?
actually.
Were they related?
They should have gotten together and had crooked-eyed babies, I think.
Well, I mean, I'll be honest with you. There was this what was it? It was like National Geographic or People Magazine or something did an article a couple of years ago on the extinction of the redhead. And I was sitting there and I went, pfft. So I sent them an email. My
The
baby
coming
mama-
ginger doom.
No, here, yeah, no, something like that. It was the ginger extinction. But my baby mama redheaded, and she got 2 redheaded brothers that married 2 redheaded sisters that had a whole drove, like an entire colony of redheaded progeny over there. There's 4 generations of redheads. We got it. It's good. We got a colony
And
of red.
as long as former White House press secretary Lady Ginger McFirebush of Alabaster Farms remains on this earth, we can still repopulate the ginger species.
We've got it handled.
We've got it covered.
I thought this was oil, bro.
No way, bro.
Homie just tried to cook his eggs in some lemon pledge. How high you gotta be, man? How messed up did you get last night? Oh my Lord. How'd you not smell it when you started getting it hot enough? Them eggs was cooking, bro. You see that?
Yeah, pretty high.
I mean, them eggs is cooking. How?
Oil, bro.
Lemon scent. How do you even? Oh, no, I don't believe it.
Talking
We go
TikTok.
too long. We went over time, didn't we?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
That's all right. Should I
I'm
talk us
terrible.
out?
Yeah, let's do that thing. We're gonna remove that thing. We're gonna do this thing.
Ladies and gentlemen, thanks very much indeed for joining us here on the Blast Radius. We sure do appreciate it. We are here live on Sunday evenings, same bat time, same bat channel, 8 Eastern, 5 Pacific. Do join us next week. Tell all your friends to do the same. Have a fantastic week, a great day, pleasant tomorrow, all that stuff. See you next time. Do not comply. Get off my lawn.